This program comes to you by electrical transcription. The Treasury Star Parade. With Frederick March, a flock of Americans, Al Goodman and his orchestra and chorus, and Miss Florence Eldridge, speaking for the women of America.
I speak for the women of America, the women who marched shoulder to shoulder with their men, fought silent battles, with no banners flying and no music of bugles ringing across the field. Women who left soft homes to face the empty prairie and the unseen death through mountain passes, fought valiantly against the treacherous onslaught of disease. I speak for the frail women who will not yield to weakness, and the strong women who will not yield to grief, for those whose sons lie quiet beneath the earth they fought to free, and they whose sons and husbands march now to other shores to save this shore, this precious shore, America.
Christina, turn off the radio. Did you call Antoine for an appointment?
Antoine won't be able to do your hair, Mrs. Andrews. He enlisted.
Enlisted? Why couldn't he wait to be drafted? Well, get me one of the other men.
There are no other men. They've been drafted.
No woman's ever been able to set my hair well. This awful war. We'll have to be doing our own hair and nails and maybe our own housework if this keeps on. Thank God you're not leaving, Christina.
But I am leaving, Mrs. Andrews.
What?
You don't need a companion in times like these. I'm going into a factory that makes parachutes.
They won't take you, Christina. They want young people. 45's too old.
No woman is too old to serve. I ought to know. My great-grandmother was 40 when her second daughter was born in a covered wagon rolling over Kansas.
Oh, Hester. Hester.
Yes, Mother, dear.
My time's here, Hester.
I'll call Father and tell him to stop the wagon.
No. No, Hester. The wagon mustn't stop. The other wagons had stopped, too. We must reach the river before it gets dark.
Mother, you might die on this rough road like Mrs. Willie.
Oh, women don't die of pain, Hester. Hand me that piece of homespun.
Yes.
Twist it. When the pains come, I'll bite on it. Your father will not hear me cry.
I wish I were as brave as you, Mother.
Oh, women are always brave, Hester. They've always been the staff of men's lives. Fought in the shadow of men's battles. Oh! Mother. Hester,
yes.
drop my shoulder. Remember the tales of your great aunt, Molly Pitcher.
I remember. When her husband fell beside his cannon, she fired.
Huh?
Father taught me the song about her. Molly Pitcher, she stood by her gun and ran the charges home. Because on Monmouth's bloody field, a sergeant did become.
Come. Hester!
Yes.
Twisted homespun.
My grandmother was named Hope. She grew to the sound of wagons rolling westward, northward, southward. 16,000 wagons along one turnpike in Pennsylvania. 16,000 women bearing children as Hope was born, behind weary, plodding oxen or in rough cabins. My grandmother learned to tan skins, cut and stitch them into shirts and trousers, mitts and moccasins, how to pack down the dirt for cabin floors, hoe the garden, make kettles of soap, capture straying cattle, fight pests. She learned not to shrink at the sound of arrows pinging against cabin walls in the silent night. But she learned more than this.
What more? What more?
Beyond the blood and sweat, tears of women, hands hard and crooked from unceasing labor, tired backs, bodies worn and bent from childbearing. There was that for which America stood, the great young, unformed, strong America. Cradle of freedom rocking between two oceans. Listen to that cradle rock. Out of that cradle, endlessly rocking, rocked by the strong hand, the tender hand of women, rose the boys, men, sons, lovers, generations of free men from the givers of freedom, the women of America. Yes, there was freedom, but not for all. Not for all. There were ships coming from a dark continent, Africa. Ships laden with men and women brought to a free country to be slaves.
Men and women bought and sold like chattel.
Men caught, shot, or imprisoned.
Men flogged for escaping to freedom.
Men beaten for freeing other men.
Slavery. Slavery. Slavery.
Until a woman wrote a book. A book?
What book?
A book to make slaves free. Men put down their hoe and scythe to read it. Women laid down their needles and thread to read it. Children stopped their play to read it. My grandmother Hope read it. Lincoln read it.
Abraham Lincoln read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Abraham Lincoln said the slaves must be free.
But this will be civil war.
Brother against brother. Father against son.
War makes widows and orphans and leaves women childless.
He didn't want war. He didn't want bloodshed. But the voices would not let him be.
A woman with sons wrote that book, Mr. Lincoln.
But she had to write it. A woman whose children may be fatherless if we go to war, Mr. Lincoln.
But she had to write it.
Your mother was a pioneer woman, Abe Lincoln. She was like all mothers, strong, patient, enduring. She knew what it meant to slave and sweat and die for freedom. She taught you to love freedom.
And to hate bloodshed.
And Anne Rutledge, your young first love, Abe Lincoln. Listen to her, Abe. Listen to the words on her tombstone.
With malice toward none, with charity toward all. Out of me, forgiveness of millions toward millions, and the beneficent face of a nation, shining with justice and truth.
Let the hero born of woman crush the serpent with his heel.
Who weeps? I have heard so many women weep, yet all were brave. Only women can weep and still be brave as men.
I am Mrs. Bixby, Mr. Lincoln.
Yes, I remember I sent you a letter. You're the mother of 5 sons who died gloriously on the field of battle. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom.
They might have been saved, Mr. Lincoln. One son might have been saved, or 2 or 3.
How, Clara Barton? We did our best. The government did its best.
I nursed soldiers at Gettysburg, Mr. Lincoln. They died in my arms because there were no anesthetics, no supplies, no food. If men must fight for freedom, women must have weapons to fight the pestilence and famine and maiming and death. And so Clara Barton formed the American Red Cross, fighting all sorts of wars. Man's wars, nature's wars.
Earthquake in San Francisco, thousands killed.
And always the Red Cross supplies came through.
Flood in Johnstown, thousands made homeless.
And always the Red Cross nurses were there to aid.
Forest fire in Michigan, yellow fever in Florida, tornado in Kansas.
And always the Red Cross ambulances brought doctors to save those who might have died. And then, another kind of war. I was a bride, sailing with my husband Jim on the Lusitania to visit his home in England.
Said he'd keep us out of war if we elected him a second time.
But we must fight for democracy and the freedom of the sea.
I lost my husband on the Lusitania, Mrs. Andrews. Nobody ever took Jim's place. Other women's husbands and sons and brothers went off to fight in France. Mary Pickford sold Liberty bonds on the steps of the Treasury building. Elsie Janis sang for the soldiers over there. And Susan Anthony brought us the right to vote. The right to make laws with our men and the right to fight for them to keep this country free. As free as my great-grandmother and grandmother and mother dreamed it would be years ago. With Valley Forge, Gettysburg, the Lusitania, and now Pearl Harbor. Another war for freedom from oppression, and again we women must help to fight it.
But I buy bonds, I raise money, I serve on committees. Isn't that enough?
We must buy bonds. We must raise money. But that is not enough.
Then tell me what to do.
Listen to the voices of the women who have taken men's places.
There are tools men had to drop
in plane factories,
in munitions work,
in shipyards,
tank plants, gun foundries,
parachute factories.
Take up the herald.
The Grenadiers.
Is this enough for us to do now? Will it be enough?
No. Nothing will be enough until this war is won. For we must win it. So that the baby born of a woman's agony in a wagon trundling over a dreary plain, the woman weeping as she fires the cannon her husband's bleeding hands dropped, the 5 sons of a woman who cherished them as you do yours, the Gold Star mothers grieving over graves in far-off France, and the men lying beneath the hull of the Lusitania, the Arizona at Pearl Harbor, Guam, Midway, Wake, Bataan, Java, Australia, and the countless millions wandering homeless beneath Europe's twilit skies. So that all these may not have been born and lived and suffered and died in vain. We must win this war.
So speak the women of America. Thank you, Florence Eldridge. We all have our work to do, and we're going to do it. And to help ensure our ultimate victory, we are going to buy United States savings bonds and stamps. You and you and you. Get the habit. Budget part of your income every week and join the Treasury payroll savings plan wherever you work. Savings bonds and stamps are your way of investing in America. It's your country. Keep it yours.
The United States Treasury Department thanks the distinguished artists who donated their talents to this performance. Miss Florence Eldridge, Mr. Frederick March, and a special bow to Miss Viola Klein for her magnificent script on the women of America. The orchestra and chorus were under the direction of Al Goodman. Writing by Malcolm Meacham, production by William A. Baker. This was a transcribed program. This is Larry Elliott speaking.